The Battle of Midway, fought from June 3 to 6, 1942, stands as a pivotal moment in World War I's Pacific theater. This decisive naval engagement saw the United States Navy deliver a crippling blow to the Imperial Japanese Navy, altering the course of the war. The battle's outcome not only halted Japanese expansion but also showcased the strategic prowess and resilience of the Allied forces.
The Battle of Midway, fought from June 4th to 7th, 1942, marked a pivotal turning point in the Pacific theater of World War II. The Imperial Japanese Navy, previously considered invincible, suffered a significant defeat at the hands of the United States Navy. Several critical factors contributed to Japan's loss in this decisive battle. One of the primary reasons for Japan's defeat was the successful decryption of Japanese naval codes by U.S. intelligence. American cryptanalysts had broken the Japanese J-5 code, allowing them to anticipate Japanese movements and strategies. This intelligence enabled Admiral Chester W. Nimitz to position U.S. forces advantageously, setting the stage for a successful ambush. The element of surprise played a crucial role in the outcome. The Japanese believed they held the initiative, unaware that their plans had been compromised. This overconfidence led them into a trap meticulously prepared by the U.S. Navy, resulting in devastating losses. Japanese strategic overreach also contributed to their defeat. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's plan to lure American carriers into a decisive battle at Midway was overly complex and relied on the assumption of American unpreparedness. This miscalculation proved fatal when the U.S. forces were not only prepared but also strategically positioned to counter the Japanese offensive. The dispersion of Japanese forces further weakened their position. Yamamoto's fleet was spread across a vast area, with some units diverted to the Aleutian Islands as a feint. This dispersion diluted the strength of the main attack force, reducing its effectiveness during the critical moments of the battle. Operational errors within the Japanese command structure exacerbated their vulnerabilities. Vice Admiral Kiichi Nagumo's decision-making was hampered by inadequate reconnaissance and communication failures. The lack of timely intelligence on American carrier positions led to tactical blunders, such as the rearming of aircraft for different missions, which left Japanese carriers exposed during critical periods. The resilience and adaptability of U.S. forces were significant factors in Japan's defeat. Despite the damage sustained at Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Navy rapidly repaired and redeployed its carriers, including the USS Yorktown, which played a pivotal role in the battle. This swift recovery demonstrated American industrial capacity and determination. The effective use of air power by the U.S. Navy was instrumental in the battle's outcome. American dive bombers executed precise attacks on Japanese carriers, exploiting vulnerabilities and causing catastrophic damage. The loss of 4 Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu crippled Japan's naval aviation capabilities. Japanese underestimation of American capabilities and resolve also played a role in their defeat. The Japanese command believed that the U.S. Navy was still reeling from the Pearl Harbor attack and would be unable to mount an effective defense. This misjudgment led to complacency and a lack of contingency planning. The timing of the battle was unfavorable for Japan. The U.S. had recently achieved a strategic victory in the Battle of the Coral Sea, boosting morale and providing valuable combat experience. In contrast, Japanese forces were stretched thin and their pilots were fatigued from continuous operations. Logistical challenges further hampered Japanese efforts. The vast distances involved in Pacific operations strained supply lines, and the Japanese fleet faced fuel shortages and maintenance issues. These logistical constraints limited operational flexibility and response times. The loss of experienced pilots and crew members was a severe blow to the Japanese Navy. The destruction of fur carriers resulted in the deaths of many seasoned aviators, whose expertise was irreplaceable. This loss degraded the effectiveness of Japan's naval air power in subsequent engagements. The psychological impact of the defeat at Midway cannot be overstated. The battle shattered the myth of Japanese naval invincibility and emboldened Allied forces. It marked the transition of Japan from an offensive to a defensive posture in the Pacific theater. In contrast, the victory at Midway galvanized American public support for the war effort. It demonstrated the effectiveness of U.S. military strategy and the potential for ultimate victory, boosting morale on the home front and among allied nations. The strategic implications of the battle were profound. With the Japanese carrier force decimated, the U.S. gained naval superiority in the Pacific, enabling subsequent offensives such as the Guadalcanal campaign and the island-hopping strategy that brought Allied forces closer to Japan. In summary, Japan's defeat at the Battle of Midway resulted from a combination of intelligence failures, strategic overreach, operational errors, and underestimation of American capabilities. This pivotal battle altered the course of World War II, setting the stage for Allied victory in the Pacific.
Welcome to our deep dive, this time into the Battle of Midway.
Ooh, Midway.
You might think you know this one,
Yeah.
this pivotal World War II clash, but we're going to go beyond the surface here.
Okay.
We've got some historical texts that reveal the strategic brilliance, the nail-biting drama, and the human stories that really turned the tide in the Pacific.
To the big one.
Get ready to uncover some surprises.
I bet. Yeah, it's true. The Battle of Midway was so much more than just ships and planes.
Right.
It really was a high-stakes chess match with the fate of the Pacific hanging in the balance.
So let's take you back
Okay.
to June 1942, 6 months after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Japan is riding high, feeling invincible.
Yeah.
And the architect of Pearl Harbor, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, is aiming for a knockout blow. His target, the seemingly insignificant Midway Atoll.
Interesting.
Now, you might wonder why this tiny island was so crucial.
Yeah. Why was it?
It's all about location. Midway was like an unsinkable aircraft carrier right in the heart of the Pacific.
Oh, I see.
Control Midway and you control the Pacific.
Right.
Makes sense.
Exactly. Yamamoto was convinced he could lure the American fleet into a trap
Oh.
and deliver a crushing defeat. But his plan, while brilliant, was incredibly complex.
Really?
He envisioned multiple fleets, feints, which are deceptive movements designed to confuse the enemy, and a grand convergence that would obliterate the American forces. Some historians argue that this complexity was actually a weakness, relying on too many things going exactly right.
Hold on. He was essentially betting the entire Japanese Navy on one massive, complicated maneuver. Talk about pressure.
And remember, this was before instant communication.
Right.
Coordinating multiple fleets across vast distances was a logistical nightmare. But Yamamoto was confident, maybe even a little overconfident. He believed Japan's superior naval power would guarantee victory. And that's where the American codebreakers come in, right? This is where our story takes a dramatic turn.
Absolutely. Unbeknownst to Yamamoto, the U.S. Navy had been tirelessly working to crack the Japanese naval codes. They knew something big was brewing. They had pinpointed the likely location, and crucially, they had intercepted the date, June 4th.
Wow. So enter Admiral Chester Nimitz,
Nimitz.
commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. What a daunting task he faced.
Yeah.
Outnumbered, outgunned, facing a cunning adversary.
You said it.
I mean,
Yeah. Nimitz knew he couldn't let Midway fall, but he also couldn't risk recklessly throwing away what remained of the Pacific Fleet. He had to make a gamble.
so with the intel from the codebreakers, he chose a daring strategy, a calculated risk.
Okay.
He ordered the carriers Enterprise and Hornet, along with the recently battered Yorktown, to set a course for Midway.
Now, the Yorktown is a fascinating story in itself.
Okay.
She had taken a severe beating at the Battle of Coral Sea just a month earlier. Most expected her to be out of commission for months. Wait, they patched up a severely damaged carrier and sent it back into battle in a matter of weeks.
The Navy performed a miracle,
Wow.
working around the clock. They did enough to make her seaworthy, just enough to get her back into the fight.
Wow.
Imagine the grit and determination it took to sail into battle on a ship barely holding together.
Oh, I bet the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 3 American carriers steaming towards a superior enemy force, one of them practically held together by hope and duct tape. They were sailing right into the jaws of the dragon.
Both sides knew this battle could decide the fate of the Pacific War. The stakes couldn't have been higher.
And then on June 4th, all hell breaks loose. The Japanese launched their first wave, targeting Midway's airfield. I imagine it was absolute chaos.
The initial attacks were fierce,
Yeah.
but the American defenders on Midway put up a surprisingly tenacious defense. They even managed to inflict some losses on the attacking Japanese planes, buying precious time for the fleet.
So amidst the chaos, did the American pilots just sit back and watch what was happening on the carriers?
Well, while the Japanese planes were focused on Midway, their carriers were extremely vulnerable. Their decks were crowded with fuel lines and bombs, making them sitting ducks. It was a critical moment, and Nimitz saw his opportunity.
Okay, now we're getting to the good part. It's about to get really interesting, isn't it?
Nimitz ordered his dive bombers to launch a surprise attack on the Japanese carriers. Now, these weren't just any dive bombers.
Right.
The Americans were flying the Douglas SBD Dauntless,
Okay.
a rugged and surprisingly effective aircraft.
Yeah.
The Japanese, on the other hand, relied on the Aichi D-3A, nicknamed Val, by the Allies, while Agile the Val lacked the Dauntless's durability and firepower.
So in a way, the planes themselves were already a mismatch?
Yeah, you could say that.
I imagine those American pilots must have had nerves of steel, outnumbered, facing intense anti-aircraft fire flying into the heart of the enemy fleet.
The first wave of Dauntlesses actually missed their targets.
Oh, no.
It must have been a heart-stopping moment for Nimitz and his men. But then the second wave arrived, and they found the Japanese carriers completely exposed.
That's incredible. It's almost like something out of a movie. Can you imagine the chaos on those Japanese carriers?
It was absolute pandemonium. Bombs rained down, explosions ripped through the decks, fires raged out of control. The Akagi and the Kaga, 2 of Japan's most powerful carriers, were engulfed in flames. It was a devastating blow.
Wow, a turning point in the battle for sure. But what about the Japanese pilots? Were they just caught completely off guard?
The Japanese pilots were actually returning from their attack on Midway when the American dive bombers struck.
Oh, wow.
They found themselves in a desperate situation. Their carriers crippled their carefully laid plans in ruins. Many of them seasoned veterans of air combat, fought with incredible bravery, trying to defend their ships and protect their comrades. Can you imagine the frustration, the sense of disbelief they must have felt?
From feeling invincible to having their plans unravel so quickly, it's a reminder that the tide of war can turn in an instant. But I'm guessing they didn't just surrender, right?
You're right, they weren't giving up yet. The Japanese launched a fierce counterattack, and their primary target was the already wounded Yorktown.
Oh, no, not the Yorktown. They really couldn't catch a break, could they?
The Yorktown had barely survived Coral Sea, and now she was facing the full fury of the Japanese. Wave after wave of torpedo planes and dive bombers came screaming in. It was a brutal, relentless assault.
The poor crew on that ship. They knew the odds were stacked against them, yet they kept fighting. It's hard to imagine the courage it must have taken to face those attacks, knowing that their ship was probably doomed.
The crew fought like lions, but it was a losing battle. The Yorktown was hit repeatedly. Fires raged throughout the ship, and eventually the order was given to abandon ship. It was a tragic loss, but the Yorktown's sacrifice bought valuable time.
Time for what? What was happening while the Yorktown was under attack?
While the Japanese were focused on the Yorktown, American dive bombers were searching for the remaining targets. The carriers Soryu and Hiryu.
Okay.
The Soryu was quickly located and engulfed in flames, a total loss. And then finally they found the Hiryu, the last of the Japanese carriers.
This was their last hope, wasn't it? The one they were pinning all their remaining hopes on.
Exactly. And when the American bombs hit the Hiryu, it was like the final nail in the coffin. Their offensive capability was shattered. In the space of a few hours, they had lost 4 carriers, a catastrophic defeat from which they would never fully recover.
It's almost unbelievable that a battle fought on a tiny atoll in the middle of the Pacific could have such a profound impact.
Midway truly was a turning point. The Japanese Navy was crippled, their offensive momentum broken.
Right.
From this point forward, they would be fighting a defensive war in the Pacific.
So a decisive victory for the Americans, but at a heavy cost. Hundreds of sailors and airmen lost their lives on both sides. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of war.
The losses were heavy, especially on the Yorktown. But those sacrifices were not in vain. Midway changed the course of the Pacific War and ultimately contributed to the Allied victory.
It's amazing to think that the bravery and sacrifice of those sailors and airmen on both sides shaped the world we live in today. It's easy to get caught up, in the grand strategy and the big picture.
Right.
But it's the human stories that make history come alive.
They do.
Those individual acts of courage and sacrifice are what truly resonate.
Absolutely. Take the crew of the Yorktown, for example.
Yeah.
They knew their ship was a sitting duck, but they fought like demons anyway. They manned their guns, they fought fires, they kept that battered ship afloat for as long as humanly possible. Their sacrifice wasn't just heroic, it was strategically vital.
It really makes you think about the weight and responsibility.
Yeah.
Those sailors and airmen they were fighting for their country, for their families, for their very lives.
Midway is a battle that's been studied for decades. It's a masterclass in naval strategy, in intelligence gathering, and leadership under pressure. But it's also a testament to the human spirit.
So we've journeyed through this pivotal battle, uncovered the strategies, felt the tension, and glimpsed the faces of those who fought. What stands out to you as the most important takeaway from our deep dive into Midway?
For me, it's the reminder that even when facing overwhelming odds, determination, ingenuity, and a willingness to take calculated risks can make all the difference. Midway teaches us that the tide of war can turn in an instant, and that victory often comes at a high price.
It also highlights the vital role intelligence plays in warfare. Just imagine if the American codebreakers hadn't cracked those Japanese codes. The outcome of the battle, maybe even the entire war, could have been very different.
You got that right.
Wow.
Midway is a stark reminder that wars are ultimately won and lost by people, not just by ships and planes. It's the bravery, the sacrifice, and the resilience of those individuals that truly determine the course of history.
You've given us a lot to think about. As we go about our day, let's remember those who fought at Midway, those who made the ultimate sacrifice, and those whose actions changed the world.
And maybe their stories will inspire you to delve deeper into history, to uncover those hidden stories of courage and sacrifice that shape our world. Because, as we've seen with Midway, there's always more to discover beneath the surface.